Hi guys, Louis Dangoor here from GiveMeSport for the third episode of the Turnbuckle Talk podcast, recording the day after Extreme Rules, which was an eventful show, shall we say, with a couple of eventful spots that we'll get into talking about. I'm here with someone who's I'd say been in the news, been in the wrestling Twitter news quite a lot recently. With not only his big match, but a big new gig as well. So I'm here with Jon Alba. John, how are you holding up, and how has this I'd say crazy few weeks been for you?
Man, it's been a crazy year, honestly.
Mm.
Obviously, with COVID and everything, but really since April, things in my life have just been one, two, three, four, five. I mean, non-stop. Been traveling all around the East Coast of the United States in the past 3 weeks, and this past weekend had my butt beat up by four very talented women, uh, and some of the most talented in all of the U.S. pro wrestling scene. And we got the exciting news out about ad-free shows. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, man. I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat about this show with you.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned you'd been traveling. You went to Grand Slam, didn't you?
I was at the Newark Dynamite the week prior, then I was at Grand Slam, and then I'll be at the Orlando Special Saturday Dynamite in a couple weeks from now. So, been making the rounds on the AEW circuit for sure.
I think it was you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw a tweet where I might be wrong. But did you say that the experience of going to an AEW show is so different from that of going to a WWE show? That was you who said that, right?
Yeah, well, it's totally different. It's a totally different experience, and it's crazy that you haven't had a chance to experience that yet with just all the travel restrictions. But I can't even imagine how rabid it's going to be when AEW eventually does get to the UK and expands over that way. For me, Louis, it's just like companies, and I'm not just talking exclusively about AEW here, but pro wrestling promotions. And you're someone who covers sports too, like sports franchises that do right by their fans consistently earn goodwill with their fans, right? So they're going to invest in your product, whether it's pro wrestling or a football team or a baseball team or whatever it may be. They're going to invest in it, and you're going to have their whole heart into it. And that's why AEW shows are like a party the entire time, because AEW has earned a lot of goodwill with their fan base. Not to say that WWE doesn't put on a fun, entertaining show for the live crowd, which a lot of times they are, but we all know these tropes that exist that don't always result in the best of will, like what we saw at Extreme Rules here.
Yeah, and it was, I guess, I think I'd say the disappointment with Extreme Rules from some people, particularly the ending, I guess for me was like highlighted by how good, and maybe exemplified by how good Grand Slam was, particularly obviously Omega and Danielson. That match was amazing to be at, to watch. Sorry, as a fan
It
at
was
home.
amazing to be at. It was
I was going
amazing
to
to be at.
say it
Yeah.
must have been sensational to be at. The crowd seemed so into it. I know the old trope of it would have been 6 stars if it was in the Tokyo Dome, but I don't actually think there could have been a better set of fans, a better crowd for that match to be in front of. Everyone just seems so into it. Sort of your thoughts on the match, and I guess being able to be part of it and part of the experience of obviously Dynamite, but also the Rampage tapings, which was a
Yeah.
stacked 2 hours in itself.
Yeah, and I was at All Out a couple weeks prior to that
You're a
too.
lucky man, John.
And well, it's funny because All Out, we got that cage match, which I think between that and Gargano Cole, the 2 out of 3 falls match, those two were probably the two best major pro wrestling matches I've ever been in attendance for live, I'd say. So then you get Danielson and Omega, and for my money, it was the best TV match I've ever seen live, easily,
Yeah.
without question. What I loved about that match, Louis, was that I was one of the people, and I said this on social media too prior to the show. I thought they were going to go to a draw out of the
Yeah.
gates, and especially if they were opening the show. And what I loved how they executed the draw was normally with a lot of draws in pro wrestling, you see like everyone's trying to get their finishes in right before, like they're going for the last second covers, trying to beat the clock. These two weren't doing that. They just kept fighting. And A, that was different. And B, what it said to you is that they had a lot more in the tank.
Yeah.
And it wasn't desperation. They had more to do. And what a great way to lead you to whenever they do match number 2 between those two individuals, whether it's at Full Gear or much further down the line, whenever that may happen. Live environment for that was just outstanding. Rampage, I actually only stayed for a little bit of Rampage because I had an early flight up to Maine the next day to get ready for my indie match. But I stayed for the CM Punk match, and just it's so crazy the reactions that CM Punk is getting right now. What a treat it is. How old I can't believe I'm going to ask you this. You were what, 13 when Punk left wrestling,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like
was 13 when Punk left wrestling.
so you didn't really get to appreciate CM Punk, when he
No.
was on his run. It's something special right now, and I can't wait to see what he's going to do.
Yeah, I mean, the Punk thing is obviously I've watched a lot retrospectively. I'm enjoying so much of what he's doing now. But as you say, I didn't appreciate it at the time. But just seeing him happy is lovely. I know some people are saying they want the CM Punk with the edge back, but I'm just like the sort of edge to him, the grittiness. I'm just enjoying seeing him happy, and I think that's the main thing. He's still killing it in the ring. The trunks are back instead of the tights, which I'm all here for. I was not a fan of CM Punk in the tights. But it's so cool, and it's coming off such an amazing period for AEW with Bryan, with Cole, with Punk, and it looks like we could have someone else potentially in the wings waiting. Dave Meltzer has said that there's been talk, and it's possible that Bray Wyatt will be debuting for AEW on Dynamite this week. The show's obviously in Rochester, which is the hometown of the late Brody Lee, where Brody was going to debut for AEW had it not been for COVID. I've been someone that has, I guess, not questioned Bray Wyatt coming into AEW, but AEW seems to have a very sort of reality-based wrestling sort of fundamental wrestling foundation where someone, I guess, if you're doing the Fiend gimmick, that doesn't really work. If you go back to the cult leader Bray Wyatt, for sure, that could have a place in AEW. Your sort of thoughts on Bray Wyatt potentially coming into AEW, where you see him fitting in, and I guess as a larger point, where does AEW go next if Bray does come in? Because it seems like everything has happened in the last few months. Is there a worry that maybe it's all come too soon? And then how do you better that? How do you top what has been for me, probably the best couple of months stretch of professional wrestling television, at least in my lifetime? Definitely since I've been watching. Sort of how do you feel that AEW can move on and keep this incredible sort of spell of momentum that they've got going?
Yeah, I don't know what Wyndham Rotunda really does for AEW tangibly, and that's not me saying that he can't do something. I'm saying I genuinely don't know because he was so overexposed in the role that he had in WWE that it's hard to say what his presentation would be in AEW. And when he was released, my immediate first thought was, well, there's a natural fitting for him as someone trying to lead the Dark Order, right? Like that makes sense. But I also wouldn't lean into all the spooky, culty stuff because it became bad TV, and you don't want to be associated with that stuff. He's a strong professional wrestler. He's a generational talent as far as a creative mind for the industry. I think just about everybody would agree with that. But he does seem like a little bit of an outlier in AEW, for sure. So I'm not sure if AEW is the best spot for him, but that's not to say that they can't make it work if they do. I don't know if I have the same concerns that a lot of people seem to have of, well, you got to be careful with how many people you're bringing in. There's only so many people. I think you can find roles for everybody as long as you're consistent with them. But it could happen. It could very well happen. And I just hope that if it does happen, that it's done in a way that doesn't spit in the face of the reality-based element of AEW that people do like.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of it, I was someone that said, "Don't debut Adam Cole at All Out because you're gonna dilute the Danielson stuff, dilute his stuff." And on the face of it, Adam Cole didn't stand tall at the end of his segment, but then they debuted within 2 minutes of each other. Him and Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, still getting used to that. and it was perfect. It was one of the most perfect endings to a wrestling show I've ever seen. So AEW, and we keep saying this, and it's that old trope, but they've earned our trust. That if they say, you know what, Wyndham Rotunda, Bray Wyatt is going to debut next week, okay, sure, show me what you've got, and I trust what they're going to do.
Well, and what AEW does very well, and this is something I always say on social, is that AEW, when they realize that something is not working, they pivot.
Yeah,
and that takes a lot to admit. Not a lot of promotions do that. There are a lot of good indie promotions out there that will do that when they see someone's not getting a response and they pivot. But of the major promotions, that really doesn't happen very often.
and it's, I guess, the thing with AEW as well is they do so much right that, as you say, like I think to the Dark Order thing, where Tony Khan sort of at that end of 2019,
Oh, it was
he sort of said,
brutal.
right,
Brutal.
yeah, and he
It's
said,
bad
right, I'm
TV.
taking the book now, and he did it. We've seen it with Miro, where he was really not doing a lot of great work. I don't think through any fault of his own, just people weren't really connecting with what he
Wasn't a
was
good
doing with Kip
character.
Sabian.
Yeah.
They pivoted, and now he's, I think, one of the most enjoyable characters in wrestling, particularly
The Nightmare
for me.
Collective.
They are good. They are good at sort of saying, right, this isn't working. Let's go with it. But you know what? It's going to be an exciting time for AEW, and I assume they've got a lot more in store. But John, I think it's time we broke down Extreme Rules. Because listen, it's a difficult show to break down because I thought overall the wrestling across the card was pretty solid. I enjoyed the opening 6-man tag. I thought that was a lot of fun. Big E looked great coming out of it. He feels at home with the WWE Championship. I thought Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair was great. They've clearly got some great chemistry, and that's a match we haven't seen a lot of. We saw it at Survivor Series 2017, I believe. That was great. I thought Jeff Hardy, I've been a big critic of his. He more than held his own, looked like he could still go, was incredibly popular with the fans. I thought overall the wrestling was solid, but what people are going to be talking about is the ending of the show. What are your sort of rough, quick thoughts on Extreme Rules? And I guess before we break down that Finn Balor and Roman Reigns match.
What do you remember most about a pro wrestling match, Louis, when you watch it? And you go back in hindsight. Here we are 24 hours later. What do you remember most? Do you remember
the finish?
Right, it's the finish. Okay.
Yeah.
If you cut off your talent by giving them finishes that leave a lot to be desired, or spit in the face of the story that you just told throughout the course of your match, you're doing a disservice to your talent. You're doing a disservice to your fans. It's as simple as that. And this is not. No one likes to come on these shows and spit negativity and all that. But when you have so many examples right now of good pro wrestling out there, and I'm not just talking about AEW, there are tons of promotions that are putting on good professional wrestling right now. You don't have to sit there and just take a bad finish and say, oh, let it play out. You don't have to do that. There's a way to say, let it play out, but also, hey, give me something that I can believe as is a tangible step in your point A to point C storytelling,
Yeah.
and that's what I just think happens with these finishes, because guess what? There was a lot of good wrestling on that show last night. And a couple of the matches were fortunate enough where the finishes were fine. And the rest of them, I really thought the finishes significantly brought down the quality of the show. I thought the first 2 main card matches were really good professional wrestling matches with good finishes. And then I really did not like the ending of Charlotte and Alexa Bliss at all, quite frankly. And I'm not just talking about the finish of the match. I'm talking about the segment as well. And the main event we'll get to.
The Charlotte one, it's a difficult one for me because if you just look at social media, it doesn't look like Alexa Bliss's character is working, but everything you see on at shows suggests she's doing great. All of her merchandise seems to be doing very well. The Lily puppets, I believe, did very well in terms of sales over SummerSlam. It's difficult. And I didn't hate the finish because I enjoyed the match so much, and I thought they displayed a lot. And I guess similarly to what you said, it's not only the finish of the match that sticks with you, it's the finish of the whole
Right.
show. So maybe
I remember the finish of the segment more than I remember the finish of the match. Because so here you go. So you've got this story set up with Charlotte and Alexa Bliss, where Charlotte is saying to Alexa Bliss, "Who have you become? You be your old self." That's the Alexa Bliss that people want to see. That's the Alexa Bliss that I want to see. So they have a wrestling match where Alexa Bliss is starting to act like Alexa Bliss, and she's not doing as much spooky stuff and all that. And you're like, okay, you know what? They have some pretty decent chemistry. There's always a fun dynamic when you have a tall wrestler and a shorter wrestler, and you can do the whole David Goliath thing. It always makes for a good story. And towards the end of this match, they start playing more into the character elements of Alexa Bliss. And then after the actual finish of the match, they go all in on the character elements of Alexa Bliss. And I'm saying, man, you just spit in the face of the story that you were trying to tell the entire time.
Yeah.
So that's where the disconnect happens for me, Louis.
Yeah, I do completely get it. I guess for me as well, because the ending of the show wasn't so great, maybe I'm not thinking about it that much. Maybe if this was the only bad finish, I'd be thinking about it sort of more critically. But I wanted to also touch on the finish to Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair, which I thought was a great match. Again, did go to sort of a non-definitive finish, shall we call it, but it did sort of coincide with the return of Sasha Banks, which will presumably...
No, it was a DQ on an Extreme Rules show.
Yes. Not a great finish at all.
They aired a video package right before this match telling you that anything goes and nothing's off limits, and they do a DQ.
Yeah, I did see the "there's nothing off limits" thing. Someone sort of clipped it up afterwards, and I was like, "Oh, that's bad.
Come on,
that's bad." But Sasha Banks now, which is, I think, has again maybe sort of dampened the negativity that some people would have maybe felt towards this because of the excitement that the three-way, which we're looking like we're leading to, will have. Again, I think there are so many better ways that you could have gone about this and not had the, as you say, a DQ finish on the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, particularly if you know the finish of the match afterwards might be a touch controversial, a touch to put it lightly. But I mean, I am pretty excited for the thought of the triple threat match between Sasha Banks, Bianca Belair, and Becky Lynch. I thought it was great. I thought Becky Lynch did a tremendous job. She looks in incredible shape coming back off her pregnancy and her short match, which I thought coming out of SummerSlam might have been the reason they booked the match in that way, because she couldn't go. I mean, she can clearly go. Bianca Belair is great. I enjoyed this match. Again, the finish soured it, but I think that was, again, I was sort of like, the match was good, so I was sort of on a high. The finish brought me down, but then the thought of the triple threat match sort of brought me back up again. Were you similar sort of in your thought process of that, or were you also thinking there was just so many better ways to do this without having the DQ finish?
Well, I mean, if you follow me on social, you know I've been extremely, extremely against how this whole Becky Lynch stuff has been presented, and I think the idea of trying to get her booed is just not going to work in any way. And I was really worried about the ramifications that it would have on Bianca Belair, and thankfully it seems like Bianca Belair is over enough on her own that she's not going to get booed, which is good. But she's still not getting cheered nearly as much as Becky Lynch does. Becky Lynch still gets a huge superstar reaction. You were there in the UK shows, and Becky Lynch got a huge reaction from what I understand, understandably. So it's just, when you're forcing a square into a round hole, it's just not gonna happen. They did have a very good match. I thought Bianca Belair's athleticism was just eye-opening in this match, and we all know how great of an athlete she is. But I thought Becky Lynch was like the perfect compliment for her. Becky was like, she never missed a beat. And yeah, what WWE always does very well, WWE does great moments, and you got a great moment in Sasha coming in, and you big fiery beatdown and all that stuff. But what do you risk at the expense of the moment?
Yeah,
is always the question. And I hate DQs, not just in WWE. I hate DQs in pro wrestling in general. I think it's a lazy way out of booking, and it's not an effective way of getting heat. Because what was the reaction Sasha Banks was supposed to get there? I genuinely don't know. I don't know. Was she supposed to get booed there? Was she supposed to get cheered there? I don't know what kind of reaction she was supposed to get.
Yeah. And it's a difficult one because all reports, I believe, again from Dave Meltzer, suggesting that Becky Lynch asked to turn heel. She wanted to turn heel, which, and I've been someone that said this, I guess, again, touching on the Miro thing, when it was clear that this gimmick that he started with was his idea. Yes, giving wrestlers autonomy over their characters is important. And I genuinely believe that. It's being evidenced with AEW right now. And it's awesome that people like Nikki ASH and more recently Shane Thorne are being able to bring their ideas that they've come up with to the forefront, which is great. But sometimes not a more sensible head has to prevail, but if an idea, it might come from a talent, but if it's not great, it's not great. And I don't think turning Becky Lynch heel was the right thing to do. I sort of look at it similarly to Seth Rollins in 2016. I mean, we'll get on talking about Seth Rollins, but he should have returned as a babyface. It was clear
100%,
as day.
100%.
He should have returned as a babyface.
And you missed it, and you turned him too late, and he didn't get as hot as he needed to.
And I guess it's the same thing with Becky here, where for me, she should have returned as a babyface. People had been clamoring for her to be back for months. I mean, people, I think, wanted her back at the Royal Rumble less than 2 months after she'd given birth, for God's sake. People wanted her back. It was very clear that people wanted Becky Lynch back. So for me, turning her heel was a mistake, even if it was her idea. I think sometimes you got to say, listen, like, that's not the way we should go. But I guess it would be interesting to see what the situation would have been had Sasha Banks not have been ruled out at SummerSlam. Becky Lynch, the media junket I was at, which you can check out on the GiveMeSport WWE YouTube channel, said that the original plan was for her to return in October, potentially, I guess, even around this time. So it'd be interesting to see how things would have panned out for Becky and if the heel turn would have been sort of done in a better way. But yeah, it's been disappointing, but the three-way will be exciting. I presume Banks is going to play a heel role, Belair a babyface role, maybe Lynch a bit of a tweener in this whole sort of thing.
I think it's the other way. I think Sasha's probably the tweener here, and I think Becky, they're going to continue to go just full-fledged heel. It shouldn't be that way, but I think that's what they're going with here.
Perhaps, but and I could see it, but I've got a bit of a hot take that I think Becky's moving over to Raw pretty soon.
Could happen. I would much rather, and it sucks because you're not going to get a conclusive finish if you go this way, but I would much rather Belair move over to Raw and become top challenger for Charlotte and have those two go. And I mean, I think Charlotte and Bianca Belair would have an outstanding feud. And guess what? Then you have a clear, concise of who's a heel, who's the babyface, and everyone can get behind Bianca Belair that way. That's just the way that I see it personally.
So the only reason I've kind of gone with Lynch is more of sort of the USA Network side of things, because listen, you look at the rosters, they're not balanced in the slightest. And I think USA Network will be pulling for a top star to come over. I can't see that being Roman Reigns. I can't see Brock Lesnar hanging around for too much longer. So I guess Becky Lynch kind of fits that bill, which is why I was going down that route. But I guess we'll sort of see where the situation lies. But yeah, it was a sort of this match in the semi-main event slot. I was like, okay, we'll go on to Finn Balor, Roman Reigns next. That'll be the match where hopefully we'll get a good finish. In fairness, in the minefield that is WWE, Roman Reigns' stuff has tended to make sense. You can tell that Paul Heyman's got quite a lot of involvement in that, as with Roman Reigns. It's tended to, on the whole, not everything's been perfect, but it's tended to be sensical and logical. But what we got wasn't that. So for those that haven't seen it, the match, which I thought for 90% of, was tremendous. Probably one of my favorite Roman Reigns matches. Was brilliant. Finn Balor came off looking great. So at one point, they're both on the outside. And then sort of the red light hits, and it's Finn Balor's, what they're calling the demon's heartbeat. And just saying this out loud just sounds crazy. And he starts sort of...
Now stop for a second. Imagine yourself having to explain to someone who doesn't watch pro wrestling what's about to happen. Okay, go ahead. Continue.
So he starts having, I wouldn't call it a fit.
They're palpitations.
Palpitations, exactly. Sort of on the floor, to sort of the rhythm of this heartbeat, and then he jumps up, which is okay. It's like he's sort of been possessed, that he's sort of revived. Okay, cool. The red light stays down, and he goes on this flurry of Roman Reigns, all while his entrance music plays in the background. Okay. He then gets to the top rope, and looks visibly shaky, visibly really shaky, which I thought may have been down to sort of him not being able to see. There was a lot of smoke with the red light. I thought maybe he just can't see. But then the top rope just drops, which, by the way, is an incredibly dangerous spot. Incredibly dangerous. And he just drops. And then the lights come up. And he looks like he's hurt his knee, potentially just some great selling. Gets up, speared by Roman Reigns. Finish. I was confused. I think everyone was confused. Just give me your thoughts, John, because I need to process this. I need to think about what I'm going to say next, because I was at a loss, and I still am at a loss. Even explaining this to you and sort of talking it through with you who watched the show, confused. How I would explain this to someone that didn't watch wrestling, I would have no idea. I wouldn't know where. I'd just probably say it's not worth your time.
It's not worth your time, right? That's exactly it. And what kind of statement does that make? This is the Demon's first loss in WWE, which is worth saying. It's his first match in 2.5 years, the character. And this is what you came up with. First off, as far as the match goes, like prior, I thought it was a very good match. Roman Reigns going into the crowd with his mask on was just chef's kiss heel work there. And I mean, really exceptional stuff on that. He's on an all-time great run right now, Roman Reigns. He very much is.
Yeah.
And that needs to be acknowledged. No pun intended. But as far as this finish goes, Louis. So I wrestled a match this past weekend, and I was supposed to do a top rope spot, which eventually got nixed. But I was supposed to do one, and I was talking to an AEW talent who was at the show. And I won't say who it was, but I was talking to an AEW talent who was at the show about top rope moves. And they said to me that the worst thing that could possibly happen is the top rope going out underneath you, because you lose control of your landing. And when you lose control of your landing, anything can happen. That's how injuries happen. So for a company to consciously take out a controlled landing from one of your more talented athletes and performers, after putting literal smoke and darkness around them, it's begging for a major injury. And I could not believe how irresponsible that was. And it doesn't matter. Please, the tweets I got. Oh, you're reaching, John. He knew it was coming. It doesn't matter if he knows that it's coming. He's having his feet swept from underneath him. You have no control. You cannot control that landing. It's irresponsible. It's reckless. AEW got called out when it was extremely reckless with the Matt Hardy stuff. If that got called out, this deserves to get called out. Yeah. It was bad. Aside from the fact that it was a horrible finish. Because what are we supposed to wonder? Who took out the rope from underneath him? Are we supposed to wonder that? Or are we supposed to say, oh, the Demon is such a goober that he broke the rope? Are we supposed to believe that Finn Balor's abs are just so perfect and heavy that they crush the rope? I don't know, Louis. I don't know what we're supposed to believe. It was like someone reached into a magic ball of, like they got a little pit of finishes just in these, plastic balls. They wrote a bunch of finishes down. They reached in, gave it a swirl, pulled it out. Top rope breaks. I didn't get it, man.
Thing is, and I ran a poll this morning because I was genuinely curious. I said, what was the main issue people had? Was it the turnbuckle breaking or the red light sort of revival? And 74% said the turnbuckle breaking, which was surprising to me because that can be explained in a convoluted way. Maybe on SmackDown this week, it will be sort of come out that the Usos had something to do with it, or Paul Heyman. They loosen the turnbuckle. That at least can be not great.
Explain that in the match, then. Don't. That's something that needs to be explained up front.
I agree. I completely agree. But at least that can be explained retrospectively. The red light just is goofy. You can't explain that.
No, of course not. He's got superpowers.
Like, at least from my mindset, the turnbuckle breaking can be partially explained, but I thought the whole thing was goofy. I did have one sort of silver lining, call it that. I tried to find the positives. It was very difficult. It was 4 a.m. And maybe I'm reaching here, but to me, this was the little positive was it showed they wanted to semi-protect Finn Balor.
By making him look like a loser?
Listen.
Finn Balor didn't get, in my opinion, Finn Balor did not get protected in any way by that.
I don't think he did.
Finn Balor looked like an idiot at the end of the night there.
I agree. And he did look like an idiot. And it would have been better if he just had a great match and got pinned at the end of it. But I think in WWE's mind, and I may be wrong here, and I'd be happy to be proved wrong. I think in WWE's mind, they thought this would protect Finn Balor, which for me was a slight positive.
I think you're right that that's what they thought, but I don't think the execution of that did that at all. I'm sure that they thought that the finish of Hell in a Cell 2019 protected The Fiend. I'm sure that's what they thought. Did it? No. It was the end of the Fiend character instantly.
I have seen the comparisons. I don't think this is nearly as bad.
This was not at that level, but I also don't think it's that far off. It was not that level, but it was... No. I mean, that was an all-time, like when you talk about like worst finishes of all time, that is in the top 3 worst finishes of all time in pro wrestling history.
I agree. Yeah. I don't think this was nearly as bad. I don't think it's the end of Finn Balor. I don't think it's the end of Roman Reigns. I don't think people remember just how bad it was for both Seth and Finn.
Why should I care about the Demon character right now?
You shouldn't. You shouldn't. And I think that, listen, Demon's first loss in WWE, I think we all would have preferred it if he just lost in a very back and forth match where it looked at points where he could win, which it did. If the finish just came off a final spear, everyone would have been like, you know what, great. Finn looked great. Shame the Demon had to lose, but it was great. And it's a big win for Roman Reigns, but no one's really talking about that now. And it is disappointing. Whether we see any sort of, my hope is with the Roman Reigns stuff, which I guess similarly to AEW, has earned our trust, where this stuff does tend to make sense. I know less so recently, but it does sort of tend to make sense. So my hope is that this is something that is explained and they try and book themselves out of it. I just don't know how. I can't see a way where this is turned into a positive and spun into sort of a, right, both are now better off. I think it's going to take a fair bit of repairing for Finn Balor, especially. Roman Reigns, I think, will be fine because he's still Roman Reigns. He's still great. But it was a disappointing ending to the show, which, like you said, like I said, had some very good in-ring action, had some very good wrestling. And at the beginning of the show, had some great finishes. But unfortunately, we're not sitting here talking about that. We're not sitting here praising the Big E match at the beginning. We're not sitting here praising the Usos and Street Profits, which was great. We're sitting here complaining about some crappy finishes, which is a real, as you say, a disservice to the talent involved who did some absolutely tremendous work last night, which is, it's a disappointing way to end this pay-per-view.
It's just overthinking stuff that doesn't need to be overthought.
Yeah.
I think that's what it boils down to, right? Like there are, like, I mean, I think what you just laid out was fine. Like if you're going to beat Finn Balor, if that's what you want to do, just have him get beat. And no one's, Roman Reigns is the top guy. Nobody's going to say, well, Finn Balor looks like a loser for losing to Roman Reigns. I don't think that. I mean, hell, have the bloodline throw everything they can at this guy to cheat to win, you know, like do something. This was just, I don't know. I don't know, man. It's I've been watching WWE television for 24 years now, and which is older than you, and I can't think of a time that I've had less interest in the product than I do right now. Now I watch everything because it's part of what I do. It's part of my coverage. It's, you know, and I love pro wrestling at the end of the day. And it's a shame that I say that because of the amount of talent level in WWE, where there are just really some unbelievably talented individuals there. But I have no faith in this main roster booking. I have none. So it's a shame that it's come to that.
Yeah, and I guess NXT, which, say what you want about it, there's some real bright sparks there at the moment, but it's not the NXT of 2018, 2019 anymore. the general consensus on WWE seems to be low at the moment, and I know people keep saying it. They're saving good ideas for the draft. But
No,
people
no,
are saying,
enough of the goalpost moving. Enough.
no, I know, I agree,
They're
because
saving it
they're
for the
saving stuff.
sale.
Yeah,
Like, like they're saving it for after Mania. They're saving it for when the fans come back. They're saying
yeah,
enough of the goalposts moving.
yeah.
Enough of that.
And the disappointing thing is, because the last few weeks of Raw have been great, and it shows when WWE wants to, it can pull out a tremendous show. And it really can. Like Big E winning the title was a great moment last week with the Bloodline and New
But
Day, and then
again,
into that
Big
awesome
E
three-way.
winning the title, great moment. Certainly, it absolutely was. But that was something with just a little bit of foresight
Yeah,
you could have done on a much bigger stage with more proper build. Like it doesn't
yeah,
I mean, we all laid it out. After Bobby Lashley ran through the New Day, the natural story there was for
yeah,
Bobby Lashley to be like, hey, dude. I mean, for Big E to be like, hey, Bobby Lashley, at SummerSlam in front of 40,000 people, I'm redeeming my best friends and cashing in on you,
yeah.
and I'm going to win there. And then you get a big match there in front of 40,000 people in a big pay-per-view audience rather than the day of Raw at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern, you're saying, hey, I'm cashing in tonight. Tune in. It just takes a little bit of foresight.
I agree. And listen, WWE tonight has booked Bobby Lashley and Big E. I said, I know I did the whole ratings grab thing earlier where I kind of said everything is a ratings grab. WWE's just scrambling for ratings at the moment. They're putting on great matches. I'm not complaining. I'm getting to see great matches on Raw every week, big matches on Raw. Where do you keep going, though? That's the problem. After this, what's the next big match without it being just a repeat of this match? Who knows? But it is a time where I think WWE, and I do think they will eventually, I hope, pulls it out and does something great, because AEW is right around the corner right now. In terms of being a bigger company, it's going to be years and years and years. But in terms of putting on a better product, I think AEW is eclipsing WWE week on week. It's a difficult time for WWE at the moment. But what can you? It's difficult, and I sympathize with people who it almost seems people are in this not abusive relationship, but this relationship with WWE where, because they've grown up watching it, they just can't detach themselves. And it's like, listen, if you don't want to watch the show, don't watch the show. And people are just not watching the show now. But some people seem to be watching the show in spite of not wanting to watch the show, if that makes any sense. And it's quite sad to see.
You're telling me that wrestling fans like to make themselves miserable? No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wild. Hey,
You're
you
right.
ever go on Reddit before? There's a lot of a lot of
One of
interesting
my
things.
proudest achievements in life is staying away from Reddit.
Good for you.
And I know it's hard, and I know Reddit's a minefield. Like Twitter's bad, but
Reddit is worse than Twitter.
Reddit's worse than Twitter.
100%.
Completely. That's Extreme Rules. Basically, it was a show. It was a show. We got the draft soon. That's always pretty exciting. Some fresh matches.
But again, even with the draft, and I'm not just trying to pickpocket here, but like, so the Street Profits are on my TV. They're having this great match, and all commentary saying, "What happens if we break up your favorite tag team, the Street Profits, this week?" I'm like, well, that's not going to make me want to watch this show.
They said that it was when they said that for New Day, when they were celebrating after the match, after their opening match. They were like, "What if we never see New Day together again?" Like, they just got back together. Don't do this.
It didn't work when you did it with the Dudleys the first time 20 years ago. You know, it's just like.
No, just no. But no, it's always some fresh matches, which is important. You need fresh matches. Drew McIntyre to get over to SmackDown, which I think should happen, will happen. Should be pretty exciting. But I want to do some quick sort of news bits which have been circulating over the last couple days. But before we get on to that, Seth Rollins appeared on the Broken Skull Sessions, which, listen, we can all crap on WWE's product for all we want. The WWE Network, I know you guys are suffering at the moment with Peacock. But
you don't even know. You don't even know, Louis. I used to turn on the network all the time and just have like background stuff on. Never do I anymore. It is strictly for live stuff, and that is it.
And that's not even great. But honestly, the content on the network is so good when you're talking about the documentaries, the Broken Skull Sessions. And this was a great chat with Seth Rollins. He spoke in depth about Brock Lesnar and their WrestleMania 35 match, where he says Brock suggested going on first because they were originally supposed to go on just before the main event. And Brock said, no, it's going to take the wind out of the sails of Seth's finish, winning the title, and Becky's finish, which I thought was just great. I remember there were reports at the time that because Brock wasn't main eventing, he stormed out. No, he just thought it was the right thing to do, which is great. He spoke about the original plans for the Shield breakup, which would have, and let me get this right, which would have seen him be the special guest referee for a match between Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 30 instead of just a triple threat match. Crazy. But the most interesting thing, and I think particularly after what happened yesterday, came when he spoke about the Fiend and
match, yes.
The Fiend match, the infamous Fiend match. And I want to get the quotes up here just so I can make sure that we've covered all bases and have not misquoted Seth. But he says, I can look back on it a year and a half later, but at the time I came through that curtain and I was ready to strangle Vince McMahon. I'm not kidding you. Tyson Kidd, TJ Wilson was there to hold me back. I stared right into Vince's eyes. You know where he sits in his chair over there. I looked at him. He looked at me. We didn't say a single word to each other, and he walked out. And I sat down with Paul Heyman, who was the creative director at the time. We had a conversation. And then he goes on to say how he spoke to Vince the next day at Raw once he'd sort of calmed down a bit. But he essentially has said that wasn't what they wanted to do, which is at least a positive that we know that they weren't totally crazy, that it was a WWE idea. It's crazy when you see this and then you see what happens afterwards with the Finn Balor Roman Reigns match, and it doesn't seem like WWE's learning, which is the scariest part. I get making a mistake once because you know what? Sometimes even in you can think an idea is great, and we've all had this. You pitch an idea at work, and you're like, "This is going to be a great idea," and then everyone just poo-poos it, and it just doesn't end well. And everyone's had that, but it's when it's consistently the same mistakes. You're like, okay. Is there a pattern here? And for me, this was, we all talk about it, one of the worst endings to a pay-per-view ever, one of the worst booking decisions in wrestling ever, one of the most damaging wrestling decisions ever was this finish. And hearing Seth talk about it and how legitimately angry he was, he knew that this was the end of him as a babyface. He knew he was done from here.
Yeah, and Wyndham Rotunda said that he can't wait to tell his side of the story.
His podcast, whenever he does it, it's going to be so interesting.
It's going to be unbelievable, and I cannot wait to listen to that. But, I mean, I think this match did more damage to the Bray Wyatt's career than it did to Seth Rollins for obvious reasons. But you're right. I mean, keep in mind here, you have to have more context. Seth Rollins was white hot, coming off winning the Rumble, going into WrestleMania, beats Brock Lesnar for the championship, then has that awful program with Lacey Evans and Baron Corbin that just nearly kills them. Then they heat him up again for Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, and he has that great match at SummerSlam to get him hot again. And then they kill him again with this match. It was a total roller coaster. And yeah, I mean, we talked about it. It's an all-time bad finish. And you're saying that it's ideas that are being repeated. Well, who are the people in charge here? It's coming from the same minds. It's not coming from different minds. So,
yeah. And I mean, you pluraled the word minds there. Realistically, it's one mind.
Yes, it is.
A very successful mind at a time. For me right now, not the successful mind, a little bit out of touch. A little bit is putting it lightly.
I mean, it needs to be said. It's extremely out of touch for what pro wrestling audiences look for today.
And I do genuinely think that AEW is one of the reasons people are so negative about WWE right now, because you can see that it can be done right. And I think that it's
a juxtaposition, 100%.
Exactly. And it's like, I don't know, if you've got two restaurants near your place of work, you go to one restaurant, it's great food all the time. You go to another restaurant, sometimes it's good food, the rest of the time it's not great food. Why would you go to the place that serves not great food when you can go to the place that consistently serves great food? It's the same thing here. Why would you go to the place where you have to sometimes do mental gymnastics to make things make sense?
Yeah, and you're in the UK. Do they even have good food there?
Ooh, I will say, whenever I've gone to the US, I have been blown away by how big your portions are. And this is coming from a big guy. I'm blown away.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on where you go in the US.
So we completely off topic here, but we went to we've been to Florida a few times.
Well, Florida isn't even part of the U.S. Florida is its own
Oh,
country. As somebody
yeah,
who has lived in Florida the last 3 years, it's
yeah,
its own country.
yeah. I mean, I remember we went to where did we go? We went to a cheesecake factory,
No,
and
well, that's it right there. That explains
yeah, yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's like over here in the UK, like you just get like one main course for everyone, and it's like okay, cool. We got there, and then we could have shared like two of them. It was huge. It was I got a Diet Coke, and before I'd even finished it, a new one was on the
Yep.
table. It's a whole nother world.
Yep.
It's a whole nother world. I am looking forward to getting out to the States though. Hopefully for Survivor Series. I think that's going to be annoyingly.
Hey,
It's the week.
you ever
The
been to
week
New York
before.
City?
I have not, which is why that's why I'm going for Survivor Series as well.
Okay.
Plus, media opportunities with WWE just make more sense to go there. Although not all out, Full Gear will be a fantastic show, and I would love to get out there. I just don't think doing both is going to make sense. But yeah, I mean, interesting comments from Seth Rollins there. It's disappointing, kind of to be in the position, but I guess good for him that he can look back on it not as negatively as he was at the time. But one more sort of good piece of news here, positive piece of news that I want to finish on is news of a WWE UK pay-per-view. What Culture, who I guess aren't known for their exclusives, reported this week that there's going to be a WWE UK pay-per-view, at least plans to, in September 2022. It's not just going to be like your bog standard pay-per-view because they're targeting 90,000 fans, which is more than most WrestleManias have got. So it's going to be a huge show, presumably sort of knowing the stadiums over here in the UK. Wembley Stadium makes a lot of sense. It's about time we got a UK pay-per-view, don't you think, John? I know as someone in the States who is lucky and can sort of rock up at 8 p.m. Eastern and watch the pay-per-views, not at 1 a.m. It's pretty exciting for us UK fans to have the pay-per-view. And us UK crowds, we will all say it, and the rest will say it too. We are fantastic. We are brilliant.
100%. I mean, when all you guys sit there and just go nuts for a football match that ends in a 0-0 draw, that's really impressive. Let me tell you that. No, listen, I UK wrestling crowds are great, and it's baffling to me where WWE has run shows in Saudi Arabia, Australia, all over, yet you haven't had a UK pay-per-view in 30 years. It's insane to me. So,
Yeah,
long overdue, and especially in the
long
era of
overdue.
streaming where you're not so worried about pay-per-view buys and you're streaming on your own accord. Do a Saturday afternoon in the United States, a Saturday night in the UK. That'd be perfect because we got the Royal
Yeah,
Rumble now. It's going to be a Saturday night this year, so do
yeah. I
that.
guess on that note, Sean said that there's going to be a lot more stadium shows this year, which is
Mhm.
incredibly exciting. Royal Rumble being one of them. Presumably this UK show, WrestleMania 2 nights, SummerSlam looks like Money in the Bank as well. It's going to be WWE's going to be doing some big shows, which are always great to see with big names. I want to quickly, before we wrap up, talk about some of the exciting things that you've got in the horizon. Obviously, what you can say at this juncture. Firstly, the big match at the weekend. How are you feeling? How beat up are you?
Biggest match in independent wrestling in 2021. Quite
Biggest
frankly,
match in wrestling. Biggest match in
yeah,
wrestling.
honestly, it was the biggest match of the weekend for sure, with a much
Mm.
more satisfying finish than anything that
Yeah.
you saw at Extreme Rules. But
Yeah.
no, it was great. We had Limitless Wrestling is kind of my home promotion, and if you've ever seen Limitless Wrestling on IWTV, I stand by it. I think it's one of the top independents in the world, and the level of talent that comes out of it is just insane. I mean, the lineage of the Limitless Wrestling World Championship, MJF, Anthony Green, Christian Casanova, also known as Carmelo Hayes, Daniel Garcia, and now back to Anthony Green. I think it's I mean, that speaks for itself. I think
Yeah.
that MJF guy might be all right one day. He might make it someday.
He might. He might.
But
Don't tell him though.
we
Might
had
go
an
to his head.
8-person grudge tag team match. My group that I manage, Prestigious, versus Davey N, who's one of the top women's wrestlers in New England, Becca, who has just one of the coolest stories ever and is also climbing her way to become one of the best pro wrestlers in New England, period. And then the Sea Stars, who just got signed by MLW, Ashley Vox and Delmi XO, who've been on AEW Dark a few times. Yep. Yeah, we've been telling this story over the course of 8 months, and in independent wrestling, you don't really get a chance to do that much long form storytelling. So I got goaded into a match. Things were looking great for me, and then they weren't. And I had I got punched in the face. I got my shirt ripped off me, chopped a good 9, 10 times. Had the boots put to me, got busted open on my lip. Then I had Davey End Your Life, which is, if you haven't seen the video, it's vicious. It is a running baseball slide into the turnbuckle. And then I got cinched into a Boston Crab, and it was not ideal, Louis. But it was a hell of a moment. Standing ovation. It was all for me, obviously. So
of course. I mean, have you got the bug now? Are we going to be seeing more of Jon Alba in the squared circle?
Listen, my specialties lay in my managerial skills. Okay. And I just hope what I show to the world is that I'm not afraid of anybody. You know, I got a heel beard. I grew up because bad guys have beards. That's what I've been told. People were questioning my ring outfit. Did you see my ring outfit?
I liked it. I liked the paint under the eyes.
We had the eyes, big fur coat, you know, Conor McGregor fur coat, headband. I was an athlete. Fandango, Dirty Dango was there, and he told me I looked like a creator wrestler, which I think that's the vibe I was going for, because I created a wrestler that night.
You looked like a prick, which was the intention.
I don't know how I feel about that, but okay.
But it was the intention. But you did look like the sort of guy. If I saw you in the street, I would think he looks like a prick.
Okay. How much are you paying me to be on this show today?
Too much. Far too much. Okay. But speaking of you getting paid, I guess new gig for you. Very exciting things. You're going to be working with Conrad Thompson, who is sort of, I cannot off the top of my head think about how many times I have to transcribe his podcasts each week, which seem to be with every big name there is. He's got Arn Anderson, he's got Jim Ross. So much exciting content on his ad-free shows network. Obviously, what you can share at this juncture, sort of let us know what I guess what's going on with you and ad-free shows.
Yeah, so my contract was coming up with Spectrum, and you know, it's crazy, man, because I mean, I know you discovered me through what was going on with the pandemic in Orlando and all that stuff. You know, I've been reporting on and covering pro wrestling for years, but I feel like that was kind of the time period where things took off a little bit more. I've known Conrad for 5, 6 years now. And around WrestleMania, after I had already made up the decision in my head that I wasn't going to resign, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I got an idea." And we started talking, and I never really thought working in pro wrestling full time would be a viable path for me. But you know, making the transition from traditional sportscasting into that realm is very exciting for me. And you know, Conrad's network right now focuses on a lot of nostalgia, and that's awesome. But we're gonna try to combine that nostalgia stuff with a little more current stuff. And on top of that, there are going to be some new projects that have not been announced yet that I'm going to be in charge of kind of overseeing and spearheading. And I'm really excited for that because, in my opinion, it's going to change the way that pro wrestling is covered. And I mean, you know me, I take a lot of pride in trying to do things the right way journalistically. And I think all of us, yourself included, Sean Ross Sapp, you know, Andrew Zarian, all these other great wrestling media personalities out there right now in the game are in it for the right reason and are trying to change the perception of pro wrestling media. And I think that we're on the verge of doing that. And I'm really excited for where things are going to go. And I mean, Conrad is everything that guy touches turns to gold. It's pretty incredible. So very excited to be joining that team. And it's a dream come true for me to be working with guys like Jim Ross and Eric Bischoff and Jeff Jarrett. And it's just, I can't wait, man. I told myself I would leave local news if it meant getting to work in baseball or pro wrestling full time. So I got to do one of those. So that's kind of cool.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. And yeah, like you said, and I have said this a few times, I think particularly last year, as you said, when the COVID stuff was getting out there, and I know you were sort of Florida based, so you were right in the epicenter of everything that was going on. You and Sean in particular, I think you do things very much in the right way. That is kind of, particularly for me, who was starting out around the beginning of the pandemic with more of the reporting side of things as opposed to just aggregation. It was kind of eye-opening to see things done in the right way. And I took a lot of inspiration from that in terms of how you guys would report things, the sort of verifying you guys would do. It was eye-opening to see, and kind of very I wouldn't say admirable, but I sort of used you guys without you guys knowing, really, as a bit of a guide, which I mean,
you dick.
I know.
No,
Next I'll be wrestling with a fur coat and face paint.
Oh, don't make me cut a promo on you right now, Louis.
I would go for the beard.
I'll snap right in. I'll snap right into character if you want me to.
I'd go for the beard as well if I could grow a proper beard. But
we know you can't. We know you can't. That's okay. You don't need to fool anybody, Louis. There's this thing. It's called testosterone. At some point, your balls will drop. It'll flow through your body. It'll be this great thing. You'll one day find yourself being prestigious. You never know. Might just happen.
Ooh.
But no, I appreciate the kind words on that. You know, it was definitely an experience being in Orlando during the pandemic. The world of lawlessness. And I'm actually, with this new job, I haven't really said this out loud yet, so you're getting exclusive here. I'm going to be relocating back to the New York City area, where I'm from in Jersey. So going to be doing that, and it's going to be exciting because I haven't been home near family in about 10 years. So, you know, the local sports route was awesome. I'm still going to get a chance to call some games if I want to, which is exciting. But I'm excited to jump headfirst into this new venture and really try to wear this new hat and see what we can do with it.
We're all very excited to see.
Thank you.
To see what you guys all concoct. You privately, and you guys with the bigger ad-free network. I guess empire, we'll call it. But Jon, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've never actually, I don't think we've ever spoken, not on Twitter,
over text,
which is lovely. Hopefully, we'll get to a show together at some time if I'm permitted into the United States. Both me privately and anyone from the UK.
I don't know. After that shade you threw at me, I'm going to have to talk to the Biden administration and see if we can get you on that no-fly list. We'll see.
Is that how big time Jon Alba is? He's got a sway in the Biden administration.
I don't know if you've heard this, Louis. I have an Emmy. Okay, I don't know if you've seen this before. Her name is Erica, and
she's named.
Where the hell?
I think Jon's gone. I think I've upset him because I didn't know the name of his Emmy, which is disappointing. Look at behind him. Are those like his sports trophies?
Those are the '98 New York Yankees. You weren't even a seed back then, so don't even worry about that.
My parents were just married. But Jon, thank you so much for joining me today. Absolute pleasure. Before I let you go, anything you kind of want to draw people's attention to, your social media, give us the plugs before I get rid of you.
Before you get rid of me, thank you. No, I'm super appreciative that you had me on. It was a blast chatting with you. Even over some not so great pro wrestling, but at Jon Alba, JONALBA on Twitter. Lose the H's are for losers. And obviously ad-free shows, man, go check it out. I start October 4th, and you'll hear me dropping some new content there. And we got some new projects, like I said, in the future coming up, and I'm very excited for people to see what's going on there.
Myself included. Guys, thank you very much for joining us. If you're enjoying the content on this GiveMeSport WWE YouTube channel, or the exclusive WWE interviews, these episodes of the Turnbuckle Talk podcast, please do consider us giving a subscribe. I'm pretty proud of the progress we've made in the first few months of my venture with GiveMeSport. So please do consider giving a subscribe and liking this video, and I will catch you all next time.